Hey everybody, what's going on? The Montreal Canadiens are coming off of a big victory in Anaheim, and although it wasn't perfect, there's still a lot of positives to build off of from that performance. Before we get into today's video, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to this channel. You can look for it in the bottom right-hand corner of this video. The Montreal Canadiens are coming off of a 4-3 victory against the Anaheim Ducks on Tuesday night, and there were a lot of positives to build off of from that performance, and I think we should dive into those because there's a lot to like about how this team is continuing to progress, and I'll give you reasons for that despite some inconsistencies in that Anaheim Ducks game. The Montreal Canadiens kind of had a weird week start to the week because they had two hard practices before that game against Anaheim, and I think that was structured because of how the Canadiens performed last weekend against the Boston Bruins. They were just completely outclassed by the Bruins in all facets of the game, and although the Bruins have a very strong record and have that strong kind of culture that they've built there historically, it just wasn't the type of performance that Martin St. Louis and the Montreal Canadiens wanted to see from this group, and that's something that the team had to work on, and they clearly did because they at least showed up to play on time against Anaheim, even though there was some inconsistencies throughout that game and sloppy play. That's to be expected when you head out onto the West Coast and you're starting that kind of part of a road trip. But what I wanted to focus on in this video is there's been a lot of chatter around Samuel Montembeault and the Montreal Canadiens crease, and you can make a really strong case that without Montembeault in net against the Anaheim Ducks, that the Montreal Canadiens ultimately would have lost that game. Montembeault's been performing like a number one goalie and is starting to show that he's more than just a small sample size player. He's shown it over the last year and a half now that he has the capability to be the Montreal Canadiens' number one goalie, and there's a lot of chatter about whether or not he should be the goalie that the Canadiens ultimately remove from the equation, and I think it's going to come down to what he's ultimately looking for in a contract extension. There's a reasonable number that you can look at that would make a lot of sense from both sides. I think the Canadiens would be really happy with a 3-year term. Anything below $4 million would make a lot of sense from Montreal's perspective. I think you could make a case that Montembeault would be smart to bank on that money, especially when you also consider that he's from the area and he reportedly really likes being a Montreal Canadian and wants to stay there. So I think that that's a number that makes a lot of sense from both parties. But where it becomes difficult is if Montembeault's agent and him ultimately get a little bit greedy and decide they want to test the market and get a little bit above that market value. We already saw what the Ottawa Senators paid Jonas Korpisalo during the offseason last year, and there's definitely the potential that there are teams out there looking for those goalies that will pay top dollar for them, even if they aren't guarantees in net. Look no further than what the Edmonton Oilers are going through right now with their kind of tumultuous start to the season. It hasn't been good at all, and a big reason for that is goaltending, even if the defense hasn't performed up to expectations there at all either. So I think there's a lot to look towards here with Samuel Montembeault in the Montreal Canadiens crease. And if you're a familiar reader with Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts on Sportsnet.ca, you can kind of get to the explanation that the Montreal Canadiens would like to have Samuel Montembeault either signed ahead of the trade deadline or they're likely going to move on from this player. He didn't say that fully, but it's kind of written underneath the radar, and you can kind of see that that's where this explanation is going. So I think that the Montreal Canadiens need to get this figured out sooner rather than later, because with each consistently good start that Samuel Montembeault is giving the Montreal Canadiens, you can make a case that he's making a bigger case for himself and that the money is just going to go up on a longer term. The Montreal Canadiens don't exactly have a strong defense at the moment. It's a young defense and one that is prone to making mistakes, and that's what you're going to expect when you have a young defense in the NHL. But if you have a goalie that's continuing to bail you out like Montembeault has done, like he did in Anaheim, you have to be able to pay him the money that he deserves. And I think anything under $4 million with a 3-year term makes a lot of sense for both parties. So that leaves us with the question, who do the Montreal Canadiens move on from? Whether it's Jake Allen, which I think is a little less likely because he does have that extra year tacked on to his deal, or is it Caden Primo, who the Montreal Canadiens might not be able to get face value for because of his lack of experience in the NHL? Well, Caden Primo is set to take the ice for the Montreal Canadiens on Friday afternoon, and he is the starting goalie against the San Jose Sharks. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs in this setting again as the Montreal Canadiens starter. And I think that the Montreal Canadiens have to find a solution sooner rather than later when it comes to their 3 goaltender system. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts on Samuel Montembeault as the future #1 goalie of the Montreal Canadiens are and what you think the team should do moving forward. I think it's also prudent to note that personally, in my estimation, I believe that Jacob Fowler, a Canadiens prospect right now, is the goaltender of the future in the Habs system. But as of right now, I don't think Montembeault is a bad stopgap, and I also believe that those two could essentially split the net in the future and moving forward. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.